Good morning, and welcome to the Forum. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral. It's so good to see all of you here today. It's like pretty much the first day of winter. It was 50 degrees when I got on my bicycle this morning and started on my way here. And when I arrived, we were having so many good conversations. We were like, we have to stop talking because we should be talking like this on stage. We're so grateful to have Chip Conley here with us today. Our guest has been reimagining hospitality in much the way that we're reimagining church at Grace Cathedral. And he's been doing this since the age of 26 when he found Joie de Vivre Hospitality and transformed one Tenderloin motel into the second largest boutique hotel brand in America. Then, as Airbnb's head of global hospitality and strategy, he found himself reimagining what it means to be a modern elder and how critical, yeah, that's great. I was expecting somebody to, how critical intergenerational exchange is to the modern workplace in our society. He serves on the boards of Burning Man Project and the Esalen Institute, and his books include Peak, Emotional Equations, and more recently, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. Please join me in welcoming Chip Conley.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we were laughing because so much depends on the world that you're in, and for me, like you can't be the dean of Grace Cathedral when you're 26. That's not going to happen. It's just like the whole way things are structured is you can only do that as an older person.
Yeah, you're in an industry that still has industry.
Yeah.
Terrible. She's laughing a lot. I like her. I brought her with me.
That's good.
No, it's an organization and industry and profession that still appreciates wisdom and experience that's built over time. And there's so many industries today that aren't that way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, even in your book, we had the Board of Trustee meeting. We had a retreat at St. Joseph's Art Society. Have you ever been there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Ken Folk's new place. He's made this church.
Oh, the one in South of Market?
It's South of Market. It's
That's not a church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we used to be a church. Back in my time. Okay. But anyway, so we were over there for a retreat, and and I brought up that section. You have these questions that disruption, and I talked about disruption in the religion space.
Yes.
Just in the same way. I mean, I think sometimes when you're in every single different industry, in the way you termed it,
yep.
There's a tendency to think of yourself as being the only, what are we doing in journalism? 50% of the journalists are, the positions are gone. Yeah. And there's such cataclysmic changes. It's hard to imagine and keep thinking that the changes are happening in every sector, in every place. It's just some are more severely impacted by for sure.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I appreciate Grace very much, and I hope you don't disrupt yourselves too much, because I actually think what you've got here is quite beautiful, and it has served really well for a very long time. So, yes, it's nice to innovate a little bit over the time, and continue to keep up with modern culture,
right,
to make it relevant. And actually, in some ways, back to the modern elder, that is really what a modern elder is. A modern elder is someone who is as curious as they are wise. Historically, when we've thought of traditional elders, we've thought of them within the sort of realm of reverence, revere the elders. But today, I think the modern elder is really not so much about reverence, it's about relevance. And relevance requires a certain amount of curiosity and openness to learning about context and how the world is, and how the world's changing. And if you don't understand context with that level of curiosity, you may have lots of timeless wisdom, but it's actually going to end up being not heard by people because you actually aren't able to put the wisdom into context.
And that's exactly what I think, in a way, Grace's role is. It's like, from the 1960s to now, we've been helping that church, all churches around the world, try to make that connection to modern culture. Yeah. The bishop is fond of saying that in the church service sometimes we have this thing called the passing the peace. The peace of the Lord be with you. And the bishop says that's something that started at Grace Cathedral. And even today, we have yoga on Tuesday nights. We have 600 people coming to yoga. Yeah. So when I go to other places, they're like, tell us how do you do this, and how do you meet younger people? people, and how do you, be connected to spirituality as it is today, not as it was a long time ago necessarily.
Yeah, I think, the idea of being curious and wise at the same time is not something we have history with, in the sense, there are lots and lots of historical examples of people who are curious and wise, for sure. But in some ways, there's an element of like you get older and then you just are supposed to dispense wisdom somehow, or advice. And somehow, for many people, that means that there's almost a narrowing of their life. And I think what's interesting about curiosity is an opening up. And a wisdom is a distilling down. So if you can actually be both curious and wise, you can actually open up possibilities with your curiosity and then distill down what's essential with your wisdom. And having that all within one person is somewhat magical. And so I'm a big believer in the idea of how do you cultivate and harvest both curiosity and wisdom.
Right. Yeah, and I was thinking about that as I was reading. I had two questions related to that. One was, just kind of who were wise elders for you when you were a kid, and then also just how wise eldership is changing over time. Because you're right, that's one way in which things are changing. That the person doesn't need to be the expert in everything. They're open to, because enough things have changed, so they have to be learners at the same time.
Yeah. I think a lot of my, I can't say that during my upbringing in my teen years, I'm an Episcopalian. I can't say, I was fascinated by our minister who he did a sermon once where he said, whenever you eat meat, you just need to say, thank you, cow. And I'll never forget that.
It's still here.
Yeah, I was like 12 years old. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I would say that my elders that really had an impact on me were really while I've been an adult. There's a woman named Sally G. She's no longer living, but 20 years ago, out of the blue, she reached out to me. During my Joie de Vivre era, one of the things we did was we bought a place called the Kabuki Hot Springs and turned it into Kabuki Springs and Spots, the largest Japanese communal bath in the U.S., over in Japantown here. And we've owned it for now 21 years. Sally G, 20 years ago, reached out to me. Didn't know me at all. She was 70 years old. And she says, I want to be your meditation teacher. Now, I had done meditation in my life, but I can't say that I had actually stuck with it. I liked it, but didn't love it. And so 20 years ago, this woman out of the blue, Chinese Filipino woman, 70 years old, just walks in and says to the general manager of Kabuki, I want to meet Chip Conley.
That's great.
And so I met her.
So he gave her your cell phone number.
And for 19 years, until a year ago when she passed away, I meditated with her. And so she was an elder for me that actually helped me to go inside. Helped me to go inside. And Richard Rohr. Richard Rohr, who's a Christian mystic.
Exactly.
He has so many good books. And he's fascinated by the Enneagram, which is a old personality typing tool that I'm a fan of as well. I liked his perspective on the first half of life being the period of time when you create a container.
Yes.
The container. And that the container often is a container of the ego, because the ego is something you build from your childhood. I think actually, here's my thought, is your ego is the thing, and Richard helped me with this in terms of my thinking on it. Ego is the thing you really perfect over the course of the bookends of adolescence to middlescence. Middlescence is midlife, and it's a new word that's actually starting to get some popularity. By the way, the word adolescence is only 115 years old.
Right, exactly. We had no idea.
116 years ago, there was no such thing as adolescence as a word or a concept. You're 14, you've gone through puberty, you're working in the factories or in the mines, you're actually getting married, and you're having 2 kids by the time you're 18. So the idea of a teen period or an adolescence period didn't exist. Middlescence is midlife. It's the idea of a similar, you go through hormonal changes and emotional changes and physical changes in midlife. Well, that bookends of adolescence to middlescence, the primary operating system of your life is your ego. And then what I believe strongly, and what Richard has helped me with a little bit just from his books, I've never met him. I've written him, and he's written me back, but I've never actually talked with him face to face, is he said, middlescence and beyond is when the primary operating system is your soul. Yeah. That doesn't mean you don't have the operating system of the soul earlier in your life. It just means you shift gears. And one of the key shifts that's really painful for people is this midlife crisis idea that, and some of what's happening in midlife crisis is you're shifting gears of what your primary operating system is. Now, for some people, they don't know how to shift gears.
Yeah.
They don't even have language to know that's what's going on. So we could talk more about it.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I think that was the most helpful part of me for the book. Like, for the first 3 days I was reading it, it's like everybody had to hear about the U curve of happiness. Yeah. Everybody had to hear about living longer and the 3-stage career.
Life.
Yeah, and so basically, I mean, to summarize those, the U shape of happiness is you're happiest when you're at your youngest and your oldest, and you're in your 40s. You went through a period of a few years when 4 people you cared about took their own lives.
Yep.
They're at the bottom of that U.
So I'll tell you a moment about that. So social scientists for about 30 years now have been able to show across all cultures, except for some reason Russia, but we won't get into that. But across all cultures, basically, there's this U curve of happiness. And from about age 22 to 25 on down to about age 45, your level of happiness, contentment, and life satisfaction just actually starts to diminish. There's a lot of reasons for that. We could get into it during Q&A if you want. And then around 45 to 50, on average, these are averages, on average, people they bottom out, and then around 50, they start actually getting happier. And people are generally happier in their 50s than their 40s, happier in their 60s than their 50s, happier in their 70s than their 60s. And women are happier generally in their 80s than their 70s. Men, she disagrees. Men, basically the last 5 to 10 years of their life, the happiness can actually start to flatten out or go down. Long story short is that personal narrative of happiness is so at odds with the societal narrative of aging.
Yeah.
The societal narrative of aging is you stumble into midlife, have a crisis, and on the other side of that, all you have to look forward to is decrepitude and death.
Yeah, and the crisis is kind of embarrassing because it's just like you know.
And the crisis feels like, yes, how was I not prepared for this? Or like, this came out of left field. Like, what's going on in my life such that... interesting, the Greek root of the word crisis, I did not write this in the book. The Greek is actually, it's a judgment.
Yeah.
That's actually opportunity, I thought. So it's opportunity for change. So there's an element of crisis is sort of this opportunity for change or judgment of, I don't know. All I can say is this, is the U curve of happiness has helped me to see, in my life, my dark period was 45 to 49. Really dark, very not good. I had a flatline experience, actually died on stage. I won't do that today, I promise you.
I was a little worried about that.
Yeah, no, I died on stage. I had a broken ankle and a bacterial infection in my leg. And I was on a really strong antibiotic that I probably was allergic to.
Yeah.
But I did go to the other side. So every time they'd shock me back into life, I'd say to the nurse who's holding my hand, "This is what I saw this time." This is what I saw this time. So, and it was the same thing each time, which was interesting. But so I think that period of life for me, no one prepared me for that. No one prepared me for the fact that everything seemed to go wrong in my life during that period. And it was not like it just all of a sudden went wrong. Some of them were a slow burn to going wrong. So I guess what I'm trying to do with the book and with the Modern Elder Academy that we've started down in Mexico is to really help people to understand that when Stanley Hall was the psychologist who created the word adolescence. When adolescence started to be clarified as a life stage, we created schools and tools to help people prepare for adulthood. And that was the teen years, junior high schools and high schools. I believe that it's time for schools and tools for people to prepare them for elderhood as they move from adulthood to elderhood. And that period of time that happens is a relative period. Like elder as a word, to me, is a relative word. At Airbnb, I was 52 when I joined. I'll turn 59 a month from now. But I was 52 when I joined, and the average age was 26. So when they first started calling me the elder, I took offense to it because it sounded like elderly to me. And elderly, to my mind, and again, this is just my language, is probably the last 5 or 10 years of your life. Elder, on the other hand, is a relative term. If you're surrounded by 26-year-olds, you're probably the elder.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it became the modern elder. But I think what, for me, was really interesting in this process was just recognizing that my definition of what it meant to move into elderhood was based upon that societal narrative that it was a bad thing.
Right.
And that comes from it comes from all kinds of sources. But yeah, so I think what I've been trying to help people do is to say, let's create schools and tools that help people through this midlife period, eases them into what does it mean to be an elder, a modern elder, and most importantly, helps recast their mindset around aging.
Right, right. And that's where the three-stage life cycle comes in, of studying, then working, and then retiring. And you point out that just people are living a lot
We call it
longer.
learn, earn, and then burn.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I exactly. I like that. It was so this idea too of just of not retiring completely, of finding ways to be able to find a useful contribution that you might be able to make, and having that be kind of more of a part of our focus instead of just like retiring and being completely done.
Well, retirement, we talked about earlier. Retirement actually, a lot of people don't know this, but retirement itself has been proven on so many levels that actually it increases your mortality rate.
It's bad for you.
It's weird, yeah, but it does for a variety of reasons, partly because for many of us, work was our social context and our purpose. And then you don't replace it with something else. So that's a challenge. But yes, this idea of, the three-stage life, you learn to your early 20s, you earn till you're 65, and then you retire till you die, it doesn't make, if you talk to millennials about it, they're like, what are you talking about? That's the tyranny of the three-stage life is gone for them.
Yeah, yeah.
But as a boomer, it's still, I get it. But I think the premise here is that if we're all going to live longer, and power tends to be moving younger in a digital society. We'll talk about Airbnb in a few minutes, I'm sure. But in a digital society, power is moving younger. We're all going to live longer. We've created this irrelevancy gap in midlife for a lot of people. And then world is changing faster. So living longer, power younger, world's changing faster. That is a prescription for helping people in midlife figure out how to repurpose themselves and present themselves in the world in a new way so that they can continue to be relevant. And we don't have that. We just don't have the junior high schools and high schools,
right, exactly,
the complement to what we actually put in place as soon as adolescence took hold in this society. And it's partly because we think adults are supposed to just figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
But this is part of the reason why the suicide rate in the U.S. today for people in midlife is about 50% higher than it was in the year 2000.
Yeah.
For women, it's actually spiked more than for men, which is surprising because we've read a lot. I've read a lot about how men have really got punished in the Great Recession, more so than women. But women's suicide rate was actually lower, a lot lower than men's, and they're just starting to catch up, unfortunately.
Just reading about just your work at Joie de Vivre, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how that came into being, because in a way it's part of what your story is, what you have to share as an elder.
Sure. So I'm going to tell my grace story for a second.
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
It's sort of relevant to this. Okay, you ready for this? This is my grace story.
Yeah.
I went to college, Stanford. I went straight into Stanford Business School. I was very type A, very focused. I was going to focus on commercial real estate. I went to work for a company called Morgan Stanley, the investment bank in New York, between the first and second year of business school. And I was 22 years old, and I was, sort of lost a little bit. I didn't really know where I was in the world, other than the fact that I knew I was on a path to being very successful. And I went to Morgan Stanley to work in New York that summer of 1983, and the very first project they gave me was this project of Santa Fe and Southern Pacific Railroads were going to do a merger. And it was not really a merger of railroads, it was a merger of real estate.
Right, exactly.
Because those are companies that owned real estate. And I was in the real estate division. And so my job, having moved to New York for the summer, was to spend the summer in San Francisco with my apartment in New York, coming here on weeks, every other week, and try to help this merger happen. So my very first business trip from Morgan Stanley that summer was coming into San Francisco on a Sunday in late June, where I was going to stay at the Huntington across the street, which is where Morgan Stanley was putting their people up. And we got in on the day of Gay Pride.
Yeah.
I'm 22. I have dated only women up to that point. I have been secretly harboring the fact that I am gay. And I arrive in San Francisco with my cab driver muttering, "Damn gays, can't get around the city." And so it took us a long time to get to our hotel. And that night, Sunday night, I ended up in the Cathedral here.
Right, yeah.
And I ended up in the Cathedral here, and I had a reckoning. There was a man in the Cathedral. I was here about an hour ago. I got here early, and I went in the Cathedral, and there's a man in the Cathedral who's about the age I was then. No, he's probably maybe 5 or 10 years older. And he was crying in the cathedral. And that's what I was doing Sunday 36 years ago.
Yeah.
And I went back to New York that summer, next week. So I was there Sunday, and then the next week was 4th of July weekend, which is, as it always is, Gay Pride's the end of June, 4th of July weekend. And on 4th of July weekend, based upon the power I felt in the cathedral to just do this, which is really strange to say, I'm an Episcopalian from birth, but being gay was not the thing that I could imagine even thinking about in church. I went and walked into a gay bar for the first time on 4th of July, Independence Day. And
that's beautiful.
That's my grace story.
I love that story.
So I spent that summer there, and then I came back, graduated from Stanford Business School. A couple years after Stanford Business School, working for a guy named Bill Poland, doing real estate development, sort of maverick projects down in the Showplace Square area. I had this desire to actually take my commercial real estate background, but apply it to something where I felt like we made a difference. We made people happy.
Yeah.
So I kept saying that to Bill. I said, we should create a hotel company that's just in the business of making people happy. And so Bill looked at me like, that's not the business we're in. So I decided to go.
Happiness is not the business at all.
No, exactly. So I ended up looking for a hotel to buy. And I didn't have any money. I wasn't from a wealthy family, but I was going to try to raise some money. And I went to a place where people were getting happy, which was a pay-by-the-hour motel in the Tenderloin, which was called the Caravan Lodge. How many ever been to the Caravan Lodge before? Oh, you're outing yourself there. The Caravan Lodge was a pay-by-the-hour motel that was in bankruptcy at the point that I saw it. And I decided I was going to buy it, and I wanted Bill and our company to buy it. He had nothing to do with it. And so that's 33 years ago how I started Joie de Vivre. I decided if we're going to be in the business of making people happy, why not call the company Joie de Vivre, which is a really impractical name for an American hotel company because nobody knows how to pronounce it, spell it, or what it means. But it means joy of life, and there are very few companies in the world where the mission statement is also the name of the company.
Right.
And so the Phoenix Hotel, 33 years later, is still a rock and roll hotel. It launched 33 years ago and became, a sort of crazy, notorious crossroads for creative people.
Yeah,
and that's how I got started. And then I was CEO of that company, Joie de Vivre, for 24 years. And my flatline experience about 22 years into being in the company, or running the company, was when I had this wake-up call saying, wow, wake-up call. That's what a hotelier should have, right?
Right.
A wake-up call.
That's great.
Wake-up call that just like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. There was no modern elder academy for me to go to say, I'm getting rid of an identity.
Right. Like who
Take
you
me
are.
through a ritual that will help me to
Yes.
mourn that identity and move on to what is next. There was none of that at all. And it was going into the Great Recession when I had my flatline experience. And it was so it was August 2008. And during the next 2 years, I came to the conclusion, not only did I know I had to get out of it, but it's like, who am I going to sell this to? Because it was the worst of times. And all my friends who were money-oriented just said, this is the stupidest time to ever sell this company. But I was like, you know what? I need a get-out-of-jail-free card. This is going to kill me if I continue to do this.
Yeah.
Even though it had been such a joy, that's the irony is, it was joy for me for a long time until it's like all of a sudden, it was no dimmer. It was like off. It went from on to off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that so much just because it was just a cataclysmic time in your life. And even just getting out of it, too. I mean, you didn't know you were going to Airbnb when you're...
No.
So you're just stepping into the void.
Stepping into the void. There's a lot to be said for actually going to opening up space in your life to see what actually is going to emerge.
Yeah.
And that was, in many ways, what I was willing to do. And I ended up writing a book as a result of that called Emotional Equations, which is the book before Wisdom at Work.
Yeah.
And it was really about my own personal experience of trying to understand my emotions and creating logic around my emotions. And then Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, was very pivotal to me writing that book. But I had no idea something like Airbnb was going to come along. And it was a couple years after I sold the company, the management company and the brand, Joie de Vivre. I didn't sell a lot of the hotels, which was nice that I could hold on to some of those, even though it was a terrible time still in the recession. But it was Airbnb that came along, and Brian tapped me on the shoulder,
Yeah.
not literally, but figuratively, and he said, we want to democratize hospitality, but we're this little tech startup, and we're tiny, we're growing really, really fast, but none of us have any background in hospitality or travel industry or leadership or entrepreneurship. And so we would love to have you come in and be my in-house mentor as the CEO. But we'd also have you be the head of global hospitality and strategy.
So what is that? Hospitality and
strategy. Global hospitality, yeah, what is that? Well, first of all, when Brian said all that, I said, oh, that sounds interesting. He says, can I Uber over to your house? And I said, what's that?
No, that's great.
That's true. This is 7 years ago, so I was like, I didn't have an Uber app on my phone. I didn't know what that was. Never heard of the sharing economy. Right. So I thought Airbnb was a subsidiary of Couchsurfing as a company. So I didn't know much. And so what the head of global hospitality and strategy meant that I was in charge of figuring out the strategy for the company, like where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And the company had 30 strategic initiatives when I arrived in early 2013. And nobody could recite all of them, including Brian, the CEO. So one of the things I think is really interesting about becoming an elder, or actually moving into the second half of your life, is the first half of your life is about accumulating, and the second half of your life is about editing. And I think that's true on so many levels. And so part of my role was to be not just the strategist, but the editor, to say, like, we got 30 strategic initiatives. We're going to go and take that down to just 4. We're going to have just 4 that we're going to do moving forward. And the head of global hospitality meant I was in charge of all the hosts around the world. Right. And so that meant at that point, we have 7 million listings now. We had 200,000 listings then. So, do the math in terms of how much it's grown since then. Yeah. So I was in charge of trying to figure out how to improve quality, how to make sure that we didn't have bad people on the platform, how do we improve the guest experience, all kinds of things. But the thing that was interesting is I was his mentor, Brian's mentor, but I also reported to Brian.
Yeah.
So he's 21 years younger than me. What's it going to feel like to get my first performance review from someone the age of my theoretical son? Yeah, right. That was going to be hard, and it was hard. I have a foster son who's older than Brian.
Yes.
And so the truth is that I had to get comfortable with the fact that I was going to be both curious and wise. Yeah. Because I had never been in a tech company, so I had to be the beginner's mind, be the dumbest person in the room, occasionally, a lot, asking questions because I was just learning the tech industry.
Yeah, one thing we did, we had a friend of ours who was at Airbnb, invited us over there, so our management team from Grace Cathedral, to kind of study the corporate culture, kind of the culture of Airbnb. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, about where it came from. And
Well, so let's start by saying many tech companies have somewhat of a toxic culture. Yeah. I mean, let's also take a step back and say, we're at a very interesting time in the last week or two in terms of how in the tech world, the IPO market's sort of falling apart. And you have all of these young CEOs full of bravado and hubris, because that's what you have to do to actually raise money, thinking that that's how you operate a company. And so whether it's Uber or this last week, WeWork, or Theranos with Elizabeth Holmes, there's a lot of examples of companies that desperately could use a modern elder by their side, or maybe a few, because we somehow miraculously think these young, brilliant tech leaders are going to be able to embody these relationship wisdoms and leadership skills that we gray hairs have had many years to learn. And I don't think it's about like taking the power back to the elders. I think it's about mutual mentorship. And I learned as much from Brian as he did from me. Right. And so the culture, I think, of the company, the good news is they had read a book that I wrote called Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow. And so my premise in that book is about like that people's personal growth should match the company growth. And so the company should be really just a crucible for people to actually live up to their potential. And that's all a bunch of words, but like then you have to have actions that bear that out. So part of my role in the company was also to help the culture. Yeah. And Airbnb, no company culture, no organizational culture is perfect, but Airbnb is dramatically better than the average tech company in terms of its culture. And yes, does Airbnb, one of the things I had to actually sort of help the company see culturally and strategically is if we want to say that we're a hospitality company, you got to pay occupancy taxes. You need to be regulated.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff we need to do to actually legitimize ourselves that are the things that most companies wouldn't do.
Right.
Most companies don't actively seek out, yeah, we want to pay occupancy tax, or yes, please regulate us.
Right.
But the regulation process, which has been unwieldy because regulations are done in local municipalities, and we're in 100,000 cities around the world now. The decisions are made in local city level. So it's complicated, and what San Francisco wants is not necessarily what San Diego wants, is not necessarily what Tijuana wants in terms of how you regulate home sharing. So that's not easy, but probably the worst of that process is behind us.
Yeah. Well, I do think about Uber and as a kind of an example of just like, avoiding regulation and, its relation to taxi companies, et cetera.
Well, as I said to Brian, I said, Uber can be a disruptor, that's fine. But if disruptive hospitality is sort of an oxymoron.
Yeah, exactly. Completely.
So we better not look like Uber. Yeah, everybody compares us to Uber 7 years ago in terms of Uber and Airbnb, the darlings of the sharing economy. But I said really early on, and Brian's really smart, and Brian's not like those other CEOs. He's so interested in learning. He's interested in actually being humble occasionally, unlike those other folks. So I think one of the things he learned was like, okay, yeah, we better actually learn how to build relationships.
Yeah.
And because if you're a disruptor, you're already going to be pissing off a bunch of people.
Right.
So why piss them off more with your personality?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. A lot of people in San Francisco are just concerned. They feel like the number of spaces for people to live is diminished because of. I wonder what you say to people, who.
At this point, I say, hey, we'll show you the numbers. I mean, it was a very valid concern 3 years ago. It's still a concern, but it's not a concern compared to what it used to be.
Right.
In this following sense is that there's been 2 rounds of regulations that have pretty much, and enforcement to back it up, that have pretty much put a halt to, it would never be a halt, but actually have created an enforcement mechanism. So anybody who wants to take a listing and not have it regulated properly to be a home sharing listing, it's got to be your primary home. You can only do it 90 days a year. And there's a bunch of other rules around it too, such that the players who are sort of trying to make it a commercial activity.
Yeah, that's interesting.
A landlord says, okay, I've got an 8-unit building. How do I get rid of my tenants so that I can make it into
800 units?
Or 800 units. I didn't see much of that. But you saw it with smaller landlords saying, how do I actually
apartment complexes.
How do I get rid of my tenants so that I can make it into sort of a home sharing building? I mean, that's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's not. It probably is. If it is, it's being regulated, and therefore someone's having huge fines, and there's a lot of risks toward it.
Yeah.
So when someone says that, the flip side of this, I would say, and I'm not just drinking the Airbnb Kool-Aid on this, but I've had spending enough time with hosts, is most of the press that went out was that kind of press.
Yeah.
And it was deserved because we needed to get regulated. Okay, fine. But what hasn't gotten nearly as much attention is the fact that the fastest growing demographic of Airbnb hosts in the world is people over 50.
Yeah.
And why is it that people over 50 are actually being drawn to this, what is supposedly a millennial game, home sharing?
Right.
They're being drawn to it partly because they're empty nesters.
Yes.
They have extra bedrooms, and the way they're able to stay in their home is actually by becoming an Airbnb host. In most cases, they don't have a lot of mortgage anymore, but in some cases they do.
Yeah.
And in some cases they're in a place where, frankly, being an Airbnb host actually is an antidote for loneliness. And it's like, I'm not traveling around the world anymore at age 72, but I would love to have people from around the world come and stay with me. Yeah. So this is, that piece of what home sharing allows is responsible home sharing with usually older people who are not having people come and trash homes. But does that happen? Has that happened too? Yes, it has. Unfortunately, what we've not gotten as much attention to on is those collection of hosts who've had it be a very fundamental piece of both their life and their retirement savings,
right,
or retirement income.
Yeah, my brother basically cannot afford to live in the place that he lives in, and what makes it affordable is home sharing, Airbnb, and he loves the people he meets because he's that kind of person. He's just so gregarious, and he's this single person living alone, and he loves the people he meets. And
it's interesting. So a part of the reason I'd sold my company in 2010 was because I said, I said it publicly. I said, the hospitality business, when I got into it in 1987, was hospitality, capital H, business, small b.
Yeah.
And over the course of my 24 years of running that company and dealing with all kinds of private equity firms and public company REITs, real estate investment trusts that own hotels and managing their hotels for them, the hotel business went from being capital H, small b, to small h, capital B.
Yeah.
And basically, the hospitality business, which was often, the Swigs ran the Fairmont.
Yes, exactly.
But then they sold it.
Right.
And there are all these families that you just sold their heirloom to basically companies that just wanted to make money. So the part that was interesting to me is I got out of the business because it was capital B, small h. The part that was beautiful for me in terms of being the head of global hospitality is I was in charge of meeting with hosts all over the world who aspired to, not all of them, in terms of like, some of them were just completely money hungry.
Yeah.
But many of them, most of them by far, were people who actually loved the hospitality piece, like your brother.
Yeah.
They loved the idea that they were, without having to figure out how to buy a bed and breakfast or go out and go to Cornell Hotel School, that they wanted to learn the basics of, the beauty of hospitality, frankly, which has a lot of, spirituality built into it in terms of being generous. Frankly, the story of a manger and the story of like people opening their homes before there were hotels 2,000 years ago. I mean, this has interesting sort of biblical references to it.
It does.
So I would just say that experience of going around the world and meeting people who were in the hospitality business for the first time, often after age 50, and that the reason they were doing it was secondarily because it was income, but primarily because it was turning strangers into friends. That was fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny because we had next door neighbors when we lived in Silicon Valley who sold their Silicon Valley home and had a regular B&B. And you're right, if they'd done it like 10 years later, they wouldn't have had to, because then once they had the B&B, they couldn't go anywhere. They were stuck there all the time. It was like these crazy winters, and you're right, there just wasn't another option. So in some ways, tech kind of like, it kind of provides us like a middle area between like that on and off switch. And maybe it's the dimmer switch where you can choose a little bit of more.
It can. I mean, it depends on the city. I mean, San Francisco is a controversial place for home sharing. So the good news is with the limitations on it, the Airbnb's home sharing market in San Francisco is smaller relative to our whole portfolio than it used to be. I mean, it represents like maybe 1/10 of 1% of the whole company's portfolio.
No, I can imagine that. How did you get? One thing we share two other things in common: surfing,
Which you're, I'm sure, good at.
Well, I mean, it's the difference between you and me and surfing is that I've been doing it ever since I was young.
I started.
Basically, I married a Hawaiian, and everybody around me is just like, you're married to a Hawaiian, you have to be surfing. Which I wish I could have taken you back then.
It's funny. I grew up in Southern California, and I learned French in high school, which I
me
should have learned
too.
Spanish. I'm like, what's that? I'm learning Spanish now because I live in Mexico. Because we have this modern elder academy in Mexico. I live there most of the time now. And I'm learning to surf, even though I grew up in Southern California. And I didn't surf because my mom was like, oh my God, sharks, and you're just gonna break your nose or your back or whatever. So played water polo at Stanford. I mean, I was definitely an athlete and swam, and I loved the water. But it's only the last 2 years that actually I've taken up surfing. And I think that this is again one of those things about the modern elder. It's the premise of like, wow, online longevity sites tell me that I'm going to live till age 98 based upon the inputs I put in there. If I'm going to live till age 98 and I'm 58 today, I'm exactly halfway through my adult life if I start counting at age 18. Do the math yourself. If you've got half of your adult life ahead of you, or I do, then there's things you're going to try, whether it's learning Spanish. I was just in San Miguel de Allende last week for 8 days of Spanish immersion. And surfing, which is not something you start at age 56. But the idea of trying new things, one of my heroes is Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is a management theorist, sort of really legitimized the idea of management theory. But a few things that are interesting about him. Number one is he wrote 2/3 of his 40 books after the age of 65. He lived till age 95. Secondly, he spent every 2 years, he would go and devour a new subject that had nothing to do with being a management school professor and author. So it could be Japanese flower arranging or medieval war strategies. And he'd become one of the leading experts in that. And that process of being curious and going and learning something new, like lubricated his heart and his mind as his soul, because curiosity to me is an elixir of life. So that's interesting about him. And he's also 60 years ago the person who coined the term knowledge worker.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which is, I think, time to be retired as a word, as a term. And I think it's time for us to actually amplify the term wisdom worker. Because actually, in a world that's going to get more and more artificial intelligence dependent, more tech dependent, the real thing that's going to be scarce in the world is wisdom. And I define wisdom as intuitive pattern recognition based upon knowledge and experience with a perfect alchemy of confidence and doubt. That's a long definition. But so to me, back to your question about surfing, I'd always wanted to try it.
Yeah.
I couldn't probably learn it 10 years from now. The thing that we should be asking ourselves as people in midlife is, what's the thing I can't do 10 years from now?
Yeah.
Or that I wish what's the regret I may have 10 or 20 years from now that I actually could try to learn I could try to learn today. Living in Mexico and not knowing Spanish very well, mi español es muy malo. I don't want to regret 10 years from now that I didn't start learning Spanish now, even though it's hard. It's hard to learn a language later in life.
Yeah, it's funny about the surfing too. I remember a friend of mine just, when I was turning 30, just saying, you can't ride a longboard because your shortboard time is so short. By 40, you won't be able to ride a shortboard. Yeah. And I'm still riding that little shortboard.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
wow.
but you're right. It is.
Where do you surf?
Everywhere that I can. I mean,
come on down to Baja.
I know, really.
We have a surf break right next to us.
I know, that's what I was thinking. I was like, when I saw you, I was like, oh, I hope we haven't seen each other.
Maybe we should teach. You could be like a guest faculty for a week with me.
Exactly.
Co-lead for a week.
I'll teach a course.
Would you guys come to that?
On Soren Kierkegaard.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I don't know, something like that.
Listen, I have a library there of I'm fascinated by religious studies.
Yeah.
See, I wish I'd been you. So I
know. It's true. I feel so lucky.
When people sometimes say, well, what would you have done if you hadn't gone into business? I was like, well, really, truthfully, I probably would have actually gone to the seminary. I would have gone to divinity school, probably over in the East Bay.
Yeah. I spent 7 years of my life just studying with the best teachers
books
of the 20th century. Exactly.
I'm fascinated by it. I have a huge collection of books on it. And I like the people who sort of are like Richard Rohr is interesting because he's sort of when they're
on the border.
They're on the border. When you're in this threshold space in between two things, that's when life gets most interesting.
Yeah.
Which is why adolescence and adolescence are interesting, because it's in between two eras in people's life. But I think in religious and spiritual studies, when someone's actually in between two spaces, it gets really interesting. William Blake is fascinating to me.
Completely. Exactly.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the questions I had for you was just about like the spirituality of just California life. You're on the board of Esalen, and I wonder.
I was on the board for 10 years of Glide.
Yeah, right.
Glide Memorial Church.
Exactly.
With Cecil.
Yeah, completely. Cecil Williams.
Cecil once introduced Cecil.
We have a picture of him in the murals upstairs.
So this was about 10 years ago. Actually, it was 2010. Yeah, so 9 years ago. I came, you have to raise the offering thing, so someone usually gets up and sort of gives their pitch about raising the offering.
Right.
So I'd done that a few times there, being on the board. And so this time, 9 years ago, Cecil didn't call me, Jan didn't call me, but Karen called me, and she just said, they want you to come do your thing.
I love Karen.
And she said, come do your thing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be raising the offering this time, so I'll do it at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. So I arrived 10 minutes before 9, went back to their offices to check in. And they said, well, you're finally here. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm here. And he said, are you ready? I said, yeah, I'm just raising the offering. And Jan looked at me like, no, you're giving the sermon today.
Oh, that's my nightmare right there.
I was giving the 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock sermon.
That's my nightmare.
And so normally I would say, okay, well, I'm just gonna go and work on that. No, you're on stage. Whatever. What do you call stage? What do you call it? You're on stage
in the pulpit.
You're in the pulpit the whole time. You're gonna come on stage with us on pulpit in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to figure this out while you're sitting up there. Can you handle that? I said, yeah, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I gave this sermon at the 9 o'clock and the 11 o'clock that day. Oh my God, that was crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. That is crazy.
How did we get there?
But just like, there is something, like we were talking about Grace earlier.
Oh, yes.
Alan Watts and Grace Cathedral and San Francisco Zen Center and Esalen. And I mean, there's something unique about this region in terms of just like our spirituality.
Well, I think that, the region's always been, California specifically, but I think the Bay Area even more, such on the cutting edge of what's next for people's lifestyle, cultural, and spiritual pursuits.
That's interesting. That's an interesting observation.
I think a really interesting element that's been interesting for me is the lack of ritual in people's lives. That's the other thing is we tend to have rituals, and often they were religious or they're related to religion, rituals for people during transitional times of their lives. Puberty, you might have a bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah, communion, quinceañera. You go from adolescence to adulthood, you have a commencement ceremony, commencing adulthood, graduation. You get married, you have a wedding, often in a church or in a religious celebration. You're gonna have a birth, you're gonna have a baby shower. You die, you have a funeral. But between baby shower and funeral, nada, nothing. Yeah. There's no ritual for midlife transitions. And midlife is full of transitions, whether it's divorce or some disease or menopause or empty nest or changing a career or going back to school, taking a gap year, whatever. There's a lot of midlife transitions. But because midlife as an era is so new, we don't have those. So one of the things I think is interesting in the Bay Area is how new rituals are being created.
Yes, I
to help with this and to help people. Some of them are in the spiritual realm,
right?
And some of them have this sort of pagan component to it as well. So I don't know. The whole thing's interesting that the Bay Area tends to be on the forefront of how people experience their humanity and the mystery of life. I mean, I think religion and spirituality should not be about creating certainty in life.
Right,
it should actually be about learning to live with the mystery and to appreciate it.
And feeling it completely, it's just not just an intellectual concept. It's like much deeper than that for us. The other thing that I wanted to mention that we share in common is just that Burning Man experience. And I wanted to thank you for your work on Burning Man because I enjoy going there very much.
How was it?
It was great. That was the place where in my church I was the young priest, which was kind of weird and backward to hear about spiritual wisdom from somebody who's much younger than you.
Yes.
And going there, I was an old person. Yeah. And almost my entire contribution was just talking to people as that old person who's like 20 years older than that. But I loved it.
All ages there too.
Yeah.
You were just hanging out with all young ones. I don't know.
Yeah, but even the older people that I met, were it was almost like a liminal stage in their life, and so they were looking for someone to talk.
Love the word liminal. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So for people who don't know what liminal is like it's a word, it's a beautiful word. It's sort of the best representation in the world of it is what we learned in elementary school, which is the caterpillar to butterfly journey, which is the liminal stage is the gooey mess of the chrysalis. To be in liminal state is what Burning Man's all about. Burning Man is intended to help people to become liminal, because when you're in a liminal place and sort of in a threshold between two things, you're actually more vulnerable and more open to change. And so there's Emil Durkheim, a sociologist who studied religious pilgrimages 110 years ago, coined an expression, collective effervescence.
Right.
And collective effervescence is what, based upon studying these pilgrimages, what he felt was what happens when someone is going to something that has a common purpose, people's sense of ego separation actually diminishes. And what comes in its place is this communal joy. And so the ego separation diminishes, communal joy goes up, and that's what he called the collective effervescence. And anything that creates that sense of almost emotional connection that you feel with other people may have that quality of collective effervescence. Burning Man definitely does. A remarkable sermon in a church does. And, actually, frankly, our Modern Elder Academy, that is, frankly, partly what we've tried to do is create a program that's week-long where people have that sense of collective effervescence.
We have a practice of taking questions on note cards. So Rebecca would be happy to collect your questions. I still have more Burning Man things.
More Burning Man things?
Yeah. I mean, what do you think? How did you get involved in it? And then, what do you think what does the default world have to learn from just kind of life in Black Rock City?
I'll answer the second one first. I mean, I think there's 10 principles in Burning Man that have been in place for quite a long time now, not since the start.
Self-reliance.
Self-reliance is definitely one of them. I think immediacy is one big one.
Oh, yeah,
It's
it
like
is.
there's a sense of immediacy that is Burning Man. It's one of the 10 principles. It's the 10th one. I think that's the one I take the most from it, which is, unfortunately, now Burning Man now has Wi-Fi out there, which is so unfortunate because one of the things that was beautiful is to just be there and for a week just be sort of out of communication
Yeah, that's right.
with the other world, the default world, and to be open to like what's happening in this moment. You know, serendipity happens all the time. We just don't notice it. And so I think that immediacy was part of what I liked about it. I've been going for 20 years. It's been in place for about 33, 32 years, about the same time that I started the Phoenix. I've been doing Burning Man fundraisers at the Phoenix, my first hotel, for a long time. What happened is that the Burning Man founders, there's 6 of them, and Larry's the real founder, and then there are 5 others who sort of went along the journey with him. They wanted to take their for-profit business and turn it into a nonprofit. Now, that doesn't happen very often, and they wanted to create a board of directors for the nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so I was one of the founding board members about a decade ago to help that process, and then to do a bunch of other things too. So it was a beautiful journey. I'm just as of October, as of this next month, stepping down from that board role.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciated in terms of the learning is that, Burning Man's a bit of a utopian vision for how the world could be. When Brian Chesky first went, Airbnb CEO, he went my first year that I was working with him. He went out there and
2013, right?
2013.
Yeah,
and
I
he
was
said-
there too.
He said, this is what the world would be like if artists ruled the world. And there's something truth about that. But actually, so
That's a great observation.
I know we got.
Yeah, so here we go.
First of all, thank you for being here.
That's exactly
you're
what
still here.
The first thing that anybody says is, thank you for being here today, exclamation point. How has having your son impacted your experience of aging and of being a modern elder? I've thought about that too. That's a great
So
question.
I have 3 sons. My 3 sons, Chip, it was in my 3 sons. It wasn't right?
Yeah.
Now I'm really aging myself here. Okay, so I have a foster son who's 43. Long story, kid from the Tenderloin, tough upbringing. That was hard at age 13, becoming his foster parent. And he's struggled in life. And then I have 2 biological sons who are 7 and 4 with a lesbian couple who are good friends. And they live in Houston. I live part of the time in Austin, and so I'm actually with the boys a lot. I think the thing that's beautiful about becoming a parent, even though I'm not a full-time parent, so I'm just sort of a pseudo-parent, although the boys know me as dad, is that it sort of like forces you to get out of your own self-absorption pretty quickly. The zen of being with a child and the zen, or the being able to be aware and completely giving presence to someone else, and is beautiful. And I think children are coming into our life partly to help us to learn that.
Yeah.
And
That's the perfect example of
yeah.
learning from another,
Yep.
learning and teaching. Would you mind sharing more of, okay, would you mind sharing more here, I'm just going to give that to you.
oh my God. Okay. NDE. Your NDE. What is an NDE? Oh yes. Thank you. Gosh, there is actually.
That's where I got it kind of
Okay.
held up.
Read it.
Okay. Would you mind sharing more of your near-death experience and how it impacted your faith, or was it a pivotal experience in some other way?
Wow. So there's actually, I'm fascinated by festivals, and I created a website called Fest 300, the 300 best festivals in the world. There is a festival. It's called the Pilgrimage of the Near-Death Experience, so NDE, in northwestern Spain. I want to go to that one someday because it's basically a bunch of people who come together and they've gone through a near-death experience. My experience, because of time, I'm not going to talk about exactly what happened. If you want to hear it, I'll be signing books. I can tell you more of the specifics of what happened. But I think the experience of having that happen, and every time I woke up from it, the 9 times I died and then came back to life, sometimes being shocked back to life, sometimes 15 seconds of no heartbeat, and then on my own I came back to life. Because I had the same vision each time, what it did was it helped me have confidence that I shouldn't be scared of dying. But it also gave me the sense of urgency that I want to live today in this life in a way that would give me a satisfaction if I died tomorrow. And so I think it was Gandhi who said, live your life as if you're going to die tomorrow, learn as if you're going to live forever, or something like that. Yeah. And so what did it do? It helped me to have less fear, helped me to feel more of a sense of being in service to the world while I'm here. It definitely intrigued me even more, and I've always been intrigued by this, but intrigued me more about just the thin veil of spaces in the world. The Celtic Christians called that thin veil, and being in places where, like the cathedral above, where the energy of the place, whether it's being in a cathedral in nature, a natural cathedral, or one that's been built, has a profound emotional, energetic impact on you. And so that's part of what I've wanted to create with the academy, the Modern Elder Academy. I think my near-death experience accelerated my process to sort of helping to say, I want to create a place where people can come, that they can feel held emotionally and energetically on a beachfront with a shaman in our program who takes you and gives you a cleansing and a blessing, as well as we do other kinds of religious ceremonies there too. So I think it more than anything gave me the sense of wanting to explore and discover the mysteries of life more.
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of people who have a profound spiritual experience come away with a kind of confidence, like you said, of just like, we just don't have to be afraid anymore. We're more connected than we realize.
Yeah, Mark Twain, who has all kinds of great quotes about San Francisco, about the weather here, but he also said, you go to heaven for the weather and hell for the company. Which, right, exactly. I don't know about that, but you know.
Okay, what does one do if they are in the second half of their life but don't have the resume? I'm always apologizing for my age. I think I'm relevant, but am always thinking younger people don't see that way.
Yeah.
Is this illogical?
No, this is not illogical at all. This is exactly why we have the academy, because there's a lot of people who are fearful of not just being irrelevant, but like, how am I going to pay for this extra longevity? If I'm going to live till 90, how am I going to pay for it? And so so part of what we do, and part of what I really believe in, is you have more wisdom in you than you think you do. Some of it's because you just have gotten used to it over time, and you hang out with people who may have some wisdom themselves. You don't even realize how valuable it could be to someone else. So part of what we try to help people do, and you don't have to come down. Frankly, it's a social enterprise. We have scholarships. Some people are on basically full scholarships. So 50% of our people who come, we've had 500 alums so far from 17 countries. 50%, over 50%, 50 to 60% have been on some kind of scholarship. So you come and you actually learn how to mine your mastery. Where is the mastery that you have built over time? A lot of times you don't see it. And being in a cohort with 18 people who are going to go through this together allows you to start understanding what you do have inside you. And most of the values that we have that are wisdom are not in our resume. It's like David Brooks' famous op-ed from the New York Times a few years ago about the eulogy versus the resume.
Right.
And in his book, The Second Mountain, talks about it again. A lot of the qualities that really are going to make you valuable in the workplace are human qualities. And their emotional intelligence qualities, which tends to grow with age, etc. But whoever wrote that, feel free to reach out to me separately. My email is chip@chipconley.com. I can give you more information. But the book would be helpful, and Academy is helpful if you don't feel like your resume shows it and you don't have the money. Still apply, because you can ask for a scholarship.
Yeah, the Episcopal Church has something like that for priests called Credo. It's almost like you go, and it's almost like in mid-career, and you get trained and connected.
Where do they do it?
All sorts of different retreat places all around the
Nice.
country. What happened was the church pension fund invested in eBay, and so it did so well. It had some extra money, and so it decided to help
love
us.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your incredible generosity of shared insights and vision. That's right. Question. What are your recommendations for the best positive ways to disrupt ageism? I ask from a personal and professional standpoint. working for AARP Media and seeing ageism occur firsthand.
Yeah. So ageism is really the last socially acceptable bias. And we hear it all the time. I mean, I don't want to get too political, but like when I see articles that basically say Bernie and, and Joe shouldn't be running because of their age, it's like, really? Would you say that about a Supreme Court justice? Would you say that about, a priest?
Yeah.
Would you say that about... So, yes, if someone is personally at a stage in their life where they are not energized and are not capable, absolutely say that. But you wouldn't say that about a black person. You wouldn't say that about a woman. So this is about, choosing as a society to actually basically paint very broadly and say, if you are beyond a certain age, you have lost your capacities to be able to contribute. Well, that's BS. I mean, it just is. And so what do we need to do about that? So I see it as there's two sides of this coin. One is we need to mint modern elders, in my opinion. And that's part of the reason we created the Academy, and why one of my big pushes as a legacy thing for me in life today is to create midlife wisdom schools. How do we create midlife wisdom schools around the world? Mine happens to be called the Modern Elder Academy, but midlife wisdom schools I think is going to be a category of hospitality meets wellness meets education meets spirituality that is going to be big in the future. But that only mints the modern elders. That only says, okay, now we have supply of people who understand what they have to offer, and they are looking to have a legacy to pass that on. But now we then have to do the structural, institutional side. And so part of what I've been doing is I've been on a speaking tour to HR conferences around the world. And to go to HR conferences, I went to the biggest HR conference in the world, which is called SHRM, SHRM, Society of Hospitality, Human Resource Management.
Yeah.
And I gave a keynote there. And I'm giving keynotes to all these things. And so between me and a woman named Ashton Applewhite, and who gave a TED Talk on the subject, and I gave my second TED Talk on the subject back in October, we just need to go out and call it what it is, and then actually help people to see it differently. So it's the combination of both. The institutional side needs to change, but we also have to actually start to own our personal narrative and not get beaten up by the societal narrative around aging. So
yeah, it's a great question, great answer. Okay. Gosh, I'm having a hard time reading some of these. How do you recommend getting young people? Oh, thanks. How do you recommend getting young people to know you are available to be a modern elder, other than just relying on grace?
So I think if you're a modern elder and you're curious and wise, the thing to do is to really help to see how can you be curious? What can you learn from someone younger than you? So one of the exercises we do at the Academy and that I've done in my own life every couple of years is, what are the 5 pieces of sage advice you would offer to someone a generation or 2 younger than you? Make sure that when you come up with your list of 5, that it is your fingerprints all over this thing. So it's not like, oh, just be yourself, everyone else is taken. Well, that's Oscar Wilde. So don't use that one. So come up with 5, and they don't have to be witty. They can be just something that is your piece of advice. So start by owning what you know, and then don't go hitting people over the head with it, but just know that this is some wisdom that you have available to you. Then go look for people who are, and how do you look for them? We'll get to that in a second, but look for younger people who you're curious about and who may know something about technology or about culture or about something that you'd like to learn about. And then just ask them out for coffee or tea, or just, that's the hard part, is how do we move beyond age segregation? Yeah. Basically, we have 5 generations in the workplace for the first time, and it's almost like there are 5 independent countries on the same continent with different dialects and with border patrols. And so how do you build a relationship with a millennial if you don't have them, in your social world? So that's the hardest part, and that I'd have to give you a personalized answer to that one because I don't know what's your story in your life. But sometimes there's ways to do that based upon just people you see in your building, if you have an apartment building, for example.
Yeah, and in our case, clergy often are encouraged to have clergy support groups, and so we have people of all different generations. And it's been the most important part of my ministry in terms of the things I've learned from that have made almost everything possible for me.
Yeah.
We have to wrap up because we have church upstairs.
Oh, only that. Okay.
But I wonder, just as a kind of a last question,
Yeah.
kind of what the future is for you, and what do you see as the future for all of us that we share too?
So I've spent most of my life being a for-profit entrepreneur, starting a boutique hotel company, and then for almost 7 years now with Airbnb. I was 4 years in a full-time role, and then now almost 3 years in a strategic advisor role.
Yeah.
I've moved into this social entrepreneur part of my life. And so the idea of not how do you find a customer need or a consumer need and fill it, but how do you find a society need and fill it?
Yeah.
And to me, the society need of helping people feel relevant and help in midlife, and helping them to move from the adulthood stage to the elderhood stage without feeling pissed off about it. And helping the world see that intergenerational collaboration is really the future. Wisdom flows in both directions. It used to be just from old to young. Now it actually moves in both directions. But for a lot of young people, they don't actually realize that it can move in both directions. It's like the young people just sort of hang out with themselves a lot of times.
We're the most segregated society by generation. That's one thing I love about churches. It's
Churches changes
the one
that.
place where you meet. My kids have always known people in their 90s and brand new babies, and
So that's my thing. I'm teaching half the year in Baja, and I hope to be a catalyst, just like Glide and Burning Man and Esalen. We're all catalysts. They're singular locations. Glide has one church. Again, these are the three institutions I was on the board with. Glide, one church. Burning Man, one festival, or we don't even call it a festival, out in the desert. And Esalen, one particular center in Big Sur. But those three organizations catalyzed social entrepreneurs, religious leaders, festival producers, personal growth retreat center operators into creating their versions of a Glide, a Burning Man, or an Esalen. I hope to do the same with the Modern Elder Academy in the category of midlife wisdom schools. So that's my future, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like a great one. We're so grateful for you coming.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I guess I'm going to be in the back signing books if anybody wants to get a book. And if people have questions, you're welcome to come.
That's right. And we have just a few quick announcements too.
Yes.
Alan Jones will be the host next week, and he's going to be interviewing Susan Nyman, who is a fascinating person. They're going to be talking about the philosophical classic Evil in Modern Thought. She's a Kantian scholar. I'm so sorry not to be the one to interview her next week. But Alan and her will be here. She's got a new book called Learning from the Germans, Race and the History of Evil. You're also welcome to join us for the 11 o'clock Eucharist. We depend on your gifts, so please make a gift if you can. And we're so grateful to you. Thanks so much, Chip. It was a great day. Thank you.